Take the paper,
Yeah.
okay, off your cake if you didn't yesterday.
Happened.
I remove the paper the next day. I leave the paper on there. It doesn't really matter, but the paper comes off easily the next day, and the cake is more stable, so it's not as fragile. Okay, so it's easy to take the paper off the next day, and it insulates it a teeny bit. Okay, this is the Genoise. I'll tell you this: the high ratio is much easier to do. The high ratio is more sturdy, it's durable, you can cut it up, lift it up, no problem, it doesn't fall apart that much. This one's a little more fragile. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do with your cake, put it on a cake board and cut the top off. You want the top to be level, and for most of you, although some of them are fairly level, most of you it's domed a little bit or you have a crack there, so we want to cut the top off. Even if it's not, I like to cut the skin off. So I would still trim just, 1/32 of an inch off the top just to get this brown skin off the top. Okay, and you guys noticed yesterday that the high ratio is quite dark. We use a lot of sugar in there. So just cut the top off first. And I'm just going to start by going around the outside, making a score mark into the cake. And I'm trimming as little as I can to get a level top. Okay, so on the outside, I'm trimming like a millimeter, okay, because that's the lowest part. Here, it's going to be more like a centimeter because this is higher, right? So once I get around 360 degrees, okay, I then continue to spin the cake and cut in with a serrated knife further and further till I cut the top off, okay? Like that. Okay, then you have your top. Check the cake, make sure it's level. Fix it if you need to. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then you're going to cut this cake into, probably for most of you, 2 layers. If those of you who have done this before, you could do 3 depending on how high your cake is. Obviously it's more difficult to cut 3 layers than 2. Okay. This one you could cut into 3, but they're going to be pretty thin. Okay, I'll cut this into 3 just to show you twice how to do this. So when you're cutting it into 3, you're going to look to the side of the cake, and we know the bottom of the cake is flat because it's on a flat surface. So I always start by cutting from the bottom. After I cut my top off, I go back to the bottom and go up. Okay, because if I didn't do a good job cutting the top off, and I use that as my reference point, my layers might be even. So I use the bottom of the cake as a reference. I find what I think is about 1/3 of the way up. Okay. Then I make a mark, then I spin the knife all the way around, making sure that that mark, if it's a 1/2 inch above the cake board, is a 1/2 inch as I spin it around. So I'm looking at that score mark in the side of the cake and making sure that it doesn't go up or down. Some of you, you'll start to wander up a little bit or you'll wander down. Just make sure it's at the same spot. Now I'm around 360 degrees. Now I can continue to cut through the cake, trying your best to keep the knife, okay, level. Do not take the knife out, okay, because you don't want to make a secondary cut, because then you end up having 2 cuts and your cake is all screwed up. Okay, first layer cut, leave the cake intact. Okay, then you're going to go up 1 more 1/3 of the way and then make another mark. You're just going in about 1 inch the first way. Cut in like here, all the way around, and then you go further and further as you spin the cake. Keeping the knife level, okay, which takes some practice. You don't want the knife like this or like that, but it needs to be completely level. So I go up another 1/3, make a mark, spin it. Okay, and then I'm around, keep going all the way through until we cut through the cake. And then we have our 3 layers. Okay? Now I remove the top 2 layers. I always leave the bottom as the bottom. If you screw up a middle layer, you can kind of switch the layers around. Okay, if one layer has a hole in it or it's crooked, you can sometimes move that to the middle. But the bottom has this on it, okay, which some people like to trim off. we know it's flat, so I always leave the bottom layer as the bottom when I'm building the cake. Okay. Now our syrup's not quite ready and it's very hot, so I'm not going to soak it for the demo. But don't forget, at this point, what are you going to do? Soak the layer of cake. When you're soaking the cake, take the brush and hold it sideways. Okay, because if you dip the brush in syrup like this and hold it up vertically, the liquid runs out. If you hold the brush sideways, it holds a little bit more liquid as you soak the cake. Okay, so try to dip the brush and hold it sideways, and then you're really not really brushing like this. You're just kind of dabbing and spinning around and kind of cover the whole surface. However you soak the cake is up to you. Some people like to soak it a lot. Okay, other people like just a little bit of syrup. Okay, I promise you, I mean, unless you go crazy, you're not going to over soak the cake. These cakes will absorb a lot of syrup. Okay, that high ratio, you can soak the heck out of it, and when you cut it, there's isn't going to be liquid running out of it. So it's up to you how much you soak it. Okay, again, it's kind of personal preference. Some people like it generous, some people not so much. Soak the layer of cake. Now we have to put our first layer of frosting on. You might need to refresh your frosting a little bit because it sat overnight. Okay, but it should still be pretty smooth. But it wouldn't hurt to take in the bowl and just stir it again. You guys have simple syrup and Italian buttercream, right? Simple buttercream and Italian buttercream. Only just to see the difference in the two frostings. Okay, again, you wouldn't make two separate buttercreams to make your cake, but since we have both, for the inside, use the simple buttercream. Okay, for the outside, use the Italian. The Italian's much easier to work with. You'll get a much smoother, nicer looking result on the outside if you use the Italian on the outside. So again, I'm just using the demo batch I made yesterday, or group 2 and I made yesterday, to do the whole cake. But simple buttercream on the inside, then you're going to crumb coat it with Italian and finish it with Italian. Okay? So I'm just going to give this a stir to smooth it out. Especially if your kitchen's warm, you'll need to do this, or if it's the summertime. If you made this buttercream last Tuesday and we were finishing the cakes on Monday, I wouldn't leave it out in room temperature for 6 days. Just put it in the refrigerator. For a few days, room temperature's fine, but I wouldn't leave it at room temperature more than that. If you leave it at if you put it in the refrigerator, you need to rewarm it. So the best way to do that is to remember, 6-12 hours before you need it, and pull it out, let it warm back up to room temperature. If you don't remember, it's very, very hard. What?
6-12 hours.
I mean, depends how big the batch is. If it's a small batch of buttercream, 2 hours will be fine. But if it's a big batch, it's going to take a while to come. You need to come completely to room temperature. Not 50 degrees, not 60, but it needs to be warm. It'll be easier to work with.
I'm sorry, I'm stretching.
So if you forget, you've got a big block of buttercream, and it's very, very hard because the butter's cold, put it in a mixer with a paddle attachment, not the whip. Turn it on, take a torch, and gently warm the bottom of the bowl with a torch on. But if you're doing this, very important, you have to keep it moving. Okay, because if you hold the torch in place even for like 2 seconds, you get a little black spot in the bottom of your mixing bowl because you burned it. So if you're using the torch, very gently warm it, keep the torch moving to warm the bottom of the bowl. Take it off, let it mix for a few seconds, it's going to start to melt, warm it a little bit more, keep the torch moving. Eventually it'll kind of smooth back out and come back up to the temperature you can use it. Okay, a couple ways to do this. One is to just plop the frosting on there. The other way would be to put it in a piping bag and pipe it in a circle. And I'll show you that with the next layer. Okay, the hardest part is again going to be keeping the cake level. And it's much easier to level a cake as you build it than to get to the top and realize it's completely not level and you need to fix the top layer. So your top layer, you've got frosting that's this thick on the sides and like this thin in the middle because you built a cake that was like that. Okay, so when you're building it, you're going to get each layer even. So if your cake layers aren't even, don't worry about it. You can fix that with each layer of frosting. So when I level this frosting, I'm going to look at it and make sure that it's level. And you're keeping your spatula level like this, not like this, not like this. Okay, you can spread like this, the spatula's still level, but you don't want to tilt it this way or this way. So I'm just going to spread the frosting around the, sometimes a little buttercream here will keep it from sliding around as much. Some people do it like this, some people do it like this. Okay, doesn't really matter, you just need to spread the frosting. It can shoot over the edge a little bit. I'm doing pretty thin layer frosting because these are kind of thin layers of cake. And then you're going to look at the cake, see if it's even. Take the frosting, scrape it off the spatula, put it on the tip so then you can add the frosting where you think you need it. Okay? If your cake's mounding up, which it might be, take your spatula like this and go from the outside into the middle. And when you come off of the cake, lift it up somewhere in the middle. Don't come across like this, because then you end up scraping the frosting off. Okay, and then you get your edges end up being sloped. Outside into the middle, all the way around. So now we're going to crumb coat it. This layer of frosting can be super thin. You're just looking to seal in the crumbs and give yourself a nice surface for the final layer of frosting. So don't worry about seeing the cake or having it look nice and pretty. Okay, you just want to cover the top with a thin layer and kind of cover the sides. Okay, I'm just going to spread over the top, okay, and let the buttercream kind of hang over the edge a little bit like that. And then I'm going to take this frosting on the edge and use it to frost the sides.
Chef.
Yeah.
So for the, you said you want the simple buttercream on the inside?
In the middle. Yeah, and then now you can switch to Italian,
okay,
even for the crumb coat.
Okay.
Again, this dirty stuff you should be using in another bowl. I'm going to scrape off most of this frosting on the top to get it to cover the sides a little better. Again, go from the outside into the middle. Take all this frosting now, and then I put on the tip of my spatula, and then I can add it to where I think I need it a little easier.